Hello, once again, Star Wars and Unboxing fans. Welcome to another episode of Darth Tuba's Star Wars Unboxing Show. I'm your host, Darth Tuba, and today we're going to hit the, I want to say vintage section, but it's really not vintage, but it sort of is vintage. What is vintage? Why'd you tell me that? I was having this thought the other day, okay? And we've had these things. I've had these conversations before, things that go on in my head. So, 43 years ago, the first Star Wars movie came out, okay? And that movie was Star Wars, no A New Hope, just Star Wars. And at the time, there was no clear indicator whether that was going to be a sequel, let alone a franchise. It was just one movie. But it took the world by storm. And here we are, 43 years later, okay, still talking about it. But what happens when you have a franchise that lasts not just for 1, 2, 3 movies, like a trilogy, but then goes on and does more, like another trilogy, like a prequel trilogy, as in episodes 1, 2, and 3 that came out in the late 90s and early 2000s. Okay? At the time when those movies came out, and again, I'm speaking from I like to see myself as kind of an observer, just watching everything. I mean, I have my own opinions on everything, but I tend to be a very positive person in general, so I tend to be positive about my Star Wars critiques. I loved all the Star Wars movies that have come out thus far. Did I love every second, every frame of film? No, not necessarily. But did I hate any frame of film? Absolutely not. Basically, my level is I either loved it, I pretty much loved it, or I liked it. Meh. That's my most critical of Star Wars moments is meh. Okay, so we got the first trilogy that came out, and I've said this on previous episodes. You get to Star Wars, it was great. You get to Empire, in hindsight, it was epic. But at the time, there was a bit of a divisiveness among fans. A lot of people did not like the cliffhanger ending, even though George Lucas was taking this whole thing from Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers serials, which had nothing but cliffhanger ending. So yeah, big shock that we would have a cliffhanger ending. But it was still a lot. And you got to remember, we had to wait 3 full years, and we had no internet. We had nothing. There was nothing in between. The only thing we had in between were the toys. That was what we had. And the story of Star Wars, the story of Empire Strikes Back. Those were like the recordings where they took basically the whole story, put it down to about an hour, maybe 45 minutes, onto an LP album, and they had a narrator kind of fill in all the gaps, and they had all the sounds from it and a lot of the music from it. That is all we had, and we ate it up. Okay, so that's kind of what happened with Empire. Then Jedi comes along in 1983 and wraps everything up in a nice bow, along with a lot of interviews and a lot of stuff going on saying George Lucas is done with Star Wars. Star Wars is going to be put to bed. In the meantime, us kids who grew up with it, by the time Jedi comes out, we had a loyalty to it, but we were ready for something else. We were ready to move on to other things. Okay, it didn't mean we didn't like Star Wars anymore. It was just different. It was just something that we felt we had kind of, our interests kind of went into other directions, right? Okay, so Return of the Jedi comes. There was a lot of hate on Return of the Jedi. Ewoks. Jabba's aliens look like Muppets. There was just, again, I love that. And a lot of people love it. There are whole channels, YouTube channels, devoted to people. I just found one. Okay, I think it's Mighty Jabba, the Mighty Jabba Collector or something. I mean, watch it. It's really great. He's just it's all Jabba. He does a lot of other stuff too, but he's a huge Jabba the Hutt fan. So everything he has is Jabba related. So obviously, the younger generation typically, and of course there are exceptions. Yes, there are a lot of older people that liked it too, but it was geared towards that younger generation. Fast forward 15 years. Now we're in the mid-90s, okay? All of those young teen, just tweens and teens that were there all through their childhood, and then when Star Wars, the first trilogy ended, are now in their early 20s, mid-20s, okay? George Lucas is back. He's going to do more Star Wars. He does episode 1. He does episode 2. He does episode 3. Well, when he does episode 1, there were a lot of fanboys out there that were like, just, this is horrible. This is the worst thing ever. George Lucas raped my childhood, which is just, I don't get that. Now, I think that's a very I don't think a lot of people felt that. I think a lot of people were just upset with the movie. They were upset with certain parts of the movie. They didn't like the way it went. They didn't like the political intrigue. It wasn't as, it wasn't like their original trilogy. And plus, they were not kids anymore. They were watching these movies with adult eyes and understanding that, there are things about this that maybe are questionable, or maybe they're plot holes, or maybe there's wooden dialogue, or maybe there's things like that. So, that's a fair point. But, for me, I was all about the story. I was all about the story. I was all about the story of Anakin. I understood where the story was going. I understood the direction it was going to have to take. But how Anakin went about being this cute little boy, the 8-year-old boy that could race pod racers, to becoming the Dark Lord of the Sith. And that's a fascinating story to me, and I think they did a really good job with it. I think they did an even better job with it once they added the Clone Wars cartoon series to fill in the gaps and give us the Clone Wars, which was an incredible add, and it made the prequel trilogy better. But there was a divide between the original trilogy fans and the prequel trilogy fans. And a lot of the prequel trilogy fans were young kids. Not all of them. I was not a young kid. I was a middle-aged guy who enjoyed the movies for what they were. They were fun movies. And they had great Star Wars toys connected to them. So as a collector, I thought it was great. And I'll come back to that in this episode in a moment. And then we had, the episode 2, which had its moments too, which I think it had, it still had some, but it had some more redeeming qualities for some. As I said, this is not me talking. But the redeeming qualities were the beginning of the Clone Wars. Did you see Jedi fighting battle droids? To see Jedi in their heyday was a really cool thing to see. And then I think Episode 3 gave most fans what they really wanted, was to see that fall to the dark side from Anakin. And, it was gut-wrenching and hard. It's a hard movie to watch. It's my least watched I watched it a lot. But of all the Star Wars movies that have come out, that's the one I've watched the least because it's hard to watch. It's a sad movie. And it starts off so positive, with Anakin and Obi-Wan, like the two heroes, going in, like Batman and Robin going in to save the day. Well, maybe not Batman and Robin, because they were kind of brooding too. But I was thinking almost like the Adam West, Burt Ward Batman and Robin. They were like just having fun with it. And then it all just kind of fell. And that was so sad. But so you have the second trilogy, and there was a divide. Oh, it was a failure. It wasn't a failure. Each one they all made $1 billion. It's not a failure. All right. But, maybe there were things in it that people didn't like. But you know what? It was George Lucas's movie, and he could do whatever he wants, because it's his movie. Fast forward another 10 years. Now Lucas sold it off. Disney has it. Sequel trilogy. Now the sequel trilogy comes out. Force Awakens, Last Jedi. Last Jedi comes out. Force Awakens comes out, and completely, everybody's head over heels in love with it, but there are a few vocal minority people saying, well, it's pretty much a carbon copy of The New Hope. Whether that's true or not, I tend not to think of it as a carbon copy. I tend to think of it as taking similar beats, which Lucas did anyway. So he did that between Star Wars and Jedi, so it made sense. Then they come out with Last Jedi, and now Last Jedi has divided the fans. I mean, I can't lie that there are, I talked to 10 people on the street, 10 friends, 10 relatives, doesn't matter who they are. One person will say they loved Last Jedi, the next person will say they absolutely despised it. I can understand why anybody would love it, because I loved it. I can understand why some people had problems with certain areas of it. But I don't understand how you could hate the movie. I feel like hate is such a strong word in any sense, but if you hated the movie, I feel like you need to reevaluate your priorities in life. And this is the guy who has rooms full of Star Wars collectibles saying that. So that's just my personal opinion. You feel free to disagree. It's okay. It's all good. Whatever you think is what you think. But a lot of people like the movie. All right, a lot of people like the direction they took it in. A lot of people like what happened with Luke. But now you've got all of these original trilogy fans, prequel fans, and now everybody's kind of disagreeing on it. And I can't help but think this is Star Trek all over again. You had original series, you had Next Generation, you had Deep Space Nine, you had Voyager, you had Enterprise, you had the J.J. Abrams movies, you had the original cast movies, you had the Next Generation movies. And then we haven't even gotten into talk about the books, the comic books, okay, and just like that, when a franchise gets that big, it happens. Even Marvel, as great as the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, and I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's not the comics. And there's a lot of people that get really angry every time, they get frustrated every time a movie. But trust me, I am a teacher, and I teach high school age students, and I can tell you without a fact, some of you might be watching, that some of you give me really strong opinions about why this Marvel movie is great and this Marvel movie is the worst thing ever to be put to celluloid. So, everybody has their opinions. But I just feel like we all need to take a collective breath and say, guys, Star Wars is going to be bigger than all of us. It's a franchise that none of us will see the end of. Okay? We're not there yet. But we're getting there. All right? Where everybody who's alive right now will eventually live out their lives, and then, hopefully a long life, and hopefully a healthy life, but eventually those lives will wind down, come to an end, and it'll be a whole new generation or generations of people, and they'll still be Star Wars. Maybe it'll take a break for a while, maybe it'll go to streaming, maybe it'll go back to movies, maybe it'll do other things, who knows. But we all have to realize that it's going to be bigger than anything we all want. And I think that's really interesting, particularly when it comes to episode 1 of The Phantom Menace. Because there's a movie I've seen such vile hatred for. And now I've seen the narrative change. And I've heard people, talk about how much they love it. Now, a lot of those people that are saying that were kids when the movie came out. And now that is their Star Wars. That's the Star Wars that they grabbed hold of. They looked at the original trilogy and thought, well, the effects were kind of, I get the story. I like this whole thing with Luke and Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, but the effects were kind of cheesy. Those hairstyles, Granted, not necessarily good things to be complaining about, but everyone's going to have their opinions. So it's interesting. So, episode 1. So episode 1 came out, and it was a juggernaut of merchandise. As a collector, I was overwhelmed, as most collectors were. I remember Steve Sansweet, Rancho Obi-Wan, Petaluma, California, greatest book of world records, biggest Star Wars collector there is. Look him up. He's fantastic. He told a story about when episode 1 came around, he walked into a Toys R Us, and kids, I've said this, rows, plural, rows, long 40-foot rows filled with Star Wars toys. Now, a lot of them were repeats just going all the way down, but there was a lot of toys. And he turned right back around and walked out. I couldn't handle it. I was so overwhelmed. I was overstimulated, whatever it is. Yeah, that happened. And then the movie came and went, and then things kind of started to die down. But one thing that they did a lot of in the episode 1 time, they were really getting into the collector series. And one thing that they were doing a lot of were 2-packs. Now, the collector series, just so you know, okay, and then this one is actually called the Action Collection. These were 12-inch figures, and they were, if you recall the 12-inch figures that came out in the 70s, they tried their hand at that. People didn't want those. Kids didn't want to play with those. They wanted to play with the action figures that were this big. It's a whole big thing about that. And there are tons of other articles and things out there where you can look that up. We can look up how, G.I. Joe was doing the 12-inch figure forever and ever and ever, Action Man in Europe, and then they started coming out with the 3 3/4-inch figures for Star Wars. I mean, there were other things too, but Star Wars was the one that really put it on the map. And then all of a sudden, everybody was switching over to 3 3/4-inch. And when Star Wars even tried to come out with a 12-inch, no one was interested. Okay, fast forward to the 90s when they started redoing the Star Wars brand, they came out with better articulated, better sculpts, 12-inch figures. And they called it the Collector Series, I think. And, kids like those, and collectors like those. And then they started coming up with these Action Collection, which I just think was the same idea, but just switching over to the next name, so to speak. Because that started coming out in like the mid-90s, like 95, 96. Then they started, when episode 1 came out, they had their own dedicated box thing and everything, and then they had these figures. So these are one of the many different 2-packs. I am not sure if this is a 2-pack that existed exclusively. It does not have an exclusive sticker or anything on it. Okay, but let's take a good look at this. This is Chancellor Valorum, right? And the Khorasan Guard. Okay, and the 2-packs were fun. They were kind of cool. I have a bunch of them. And I've slowly started to do some unboxings with them. Yes, I know collectors are going to be like, no, why are you doing that? Because Well, number one, these are my toys, and I can do what I want with them. Number two, saving space. Number three, I really do feel I'm not going to open up every single thing I have that's boxed, but I'm opening up a lot of them. Okay, and I feel that this is a good one to do. So, it's 2 action figures, good posing. Okay, and although interestingly enough, and that's another thing, like they're not very popular characters. In fact, the Khorasan Guard, did it even make an appearance in the movie? I mean, it's barely seen in episode 1. Before we take it out of the box, I do want to just kind of show you, some nice pictures. Previous episodes, I talked about Jedi Master Points. These were things that you could collect. These little UPC symbols down there. See, Jedi Master Points. And I do believe for a while you could collect them and make a purchase. Use them to purchase different things, but they weren't anything exclusive. They were mostly just like a poster or a coloring book or things like that. So we never and a lot of people were trying to save up the points for something big. Every figure, every box toy, everything. And then I think at some point I had amassed like 1,500 Jedi Master Points. Well, 1,500 Jedi Master Points, I think, bought like a copy of the video cassette of Episode 1. Great. I already had it on DVD, so I didn't really need that. All right, so the back of the box says, a generation before Star Wars A New Hope, ... in a galaxy far, far away, an evil force is gaining strength and threatens an entire civilization. 2 courageous Jedi, a young queen, a Gungan outcast, and a slave boy named Anakin band together to save a planet under attack as the fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance. And what I loved about that paragraph is that it just basically described the plot of Episode 1 as if it was a standalone movie that had nothing to do with the growth and build of Anakin and his fall to the dark side. It was just an adventure. But it was an adventure that put all these different players into each other's path. And that's what connects to the next film. So I thought that was kind of nice. We have a picture with, as I said, we have a picture right here with Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan, and the Chancellor. Finis Valorum. I did not think I knew his first name. The beleaguered Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Senate convenes an emergency session at the appeal of Queen Amidala to take action against the encroaching Trade Federation forces on Naboo. Now, that's probably right there the extent of the action that Chancellor Valorum had. Okay? He didn't do much. But I think in the idea of Hasbro, I think the idea was, maybe there were adventures that he could go on, that he could later on, he did seem to have a lot of communication with the Jedi. Maybe there was some stuff they did together, but, essentially he was a politician. He was a senator. So that's kind of where he was. So maybe that playability factor wasn't really there. The other photo, which is the picture of the guard with Chancellor, with actually Chancellor Palpatine, an imposing Khorasan Guard wearing ceremonial robe and crested helmet accompanies Senator Palpatine at the arrival of Queen Amidala and the Jedi ambassadors. So now there's another one that could have been ready for any kind of action, but ended up not really doing anything. So but again, that's the thing. Toys were meant to be anything. They could be you could have every single person in the movie. Every single person could be in an action, be ready for action, and that's why it's kind of one of those things. Oh, I think we have twist ties. Yeah, ugh. I hate twist ties. Ugh. But every single person could be in their own adventure, and it didn't matter what the movie said. That's the whole point of it. That's the whole point of buying the toys. And I will say that it was nice back in the day. I hate to sound like an old fart, but I'm going to sound like it. Back in the day, when these movies came out and you literally got every figure you could possibly get. If that person had a second of screen time, they probably got a figure. And that is no longer the case, I'm sorry to say. Hasbro keeps saying that, there just isn't a market for that. And I understand that. But all I'm going to say is this. If they can take a Jabba sail barge and make that into a crowdsourced thing, then guess what? They can do, Maz Kanata's cantina or whatever you call it, Maz Kanata's castle playset, and have it filled with 20 of the figures. Don't tell me you can't do that. You can do that. You might have to charge like $500 for it, But you could do that. And you'll never know if you don't try. And I hope that they know that and they're thinking that, and I hope that they're watching this. I mean, I doubt they are, but if they are, why not put that forward? I understand if, little kids may not want to play with 3 3/4 inch, creatures from Maz Kanata and Maz's den, but or what about Canto Bite? I mean, I get it. There probably aren't going to be a lot of people interested in playing with a Canto Bite playset. Of course, they did make a Canto Bite cruiser. So, there's that. Oh my god, so much work. Then they switched to... I miss when about 5 or 10 years ago, they switched from these really hard twist ties to almost like a paper twist tie. Very easy to get rid of. And then we have all these... Oh my, what is all this? All right. I'm going to just pull you off. Oh my goodness. Now, I will admit that some of these 2-packs were definitely made with the collector in mind, because they're meant to kind of keep everything in place so that they don't open up. But nonetheless, Hasbro, for goodness sake, it's kind of ridiculous here. Hey. All right, so now you'll notice, and we'll take a good close look at the Khorasan Guard in a second. Let me just get them. Okay. See, I thought they did a really nice job with these figures, because... Oh, that's what that is. Okay. It's like a... Oh, I see. Okay, I think it's just a beveled kind of thing. All right. You stay there. I'll be right with you, Chancellor. I think the 3 3/4 inch Chancellor did actually come with a weapon, which I thought was always funny. Like, would he carry around a blaster? I don't know. And I will admit, I have an affinity for the Chancellor Valorum. I feel like his character was underutilized. I think in the expanded universe he was actually assassinated later, but the reality is that it was really fun that they cast Terrence Stamp as that. Those of you children of the 80s like me will recall a certain Superman villain that he played that was amazing and awesome, General Zod. And I always thought that was I don't know if that was just, he's a good actor, he's been in other things, and I don't think it's just that, but it was just kind of funny to consider that. Alright, so we have our soldier here, and again, like most of them, they kind of have this like grip up like this, so you can put the... And again, of course, I'll get some close-ups in here. Yeah, they have it set up. All right, that didn't work. Come on, dude. You have to really tilt it up. Okay. Okay, and then there it is. Now it's so funny, like when I, all these times opening up Sideshow and Hot Toys figures, and these, which are so much, they have so much more detail, so much more of everything. And then you got these guys, and I can barely get him to stand up. Stay. He's going to fall. He's going to fall. Almost there. I know he's going to fall. Maybe not. Okay. All right, so the biggest thing to notice about this character, okay, take away his kind of Trojan feathery top there and replace everything with red. And what do you got? You got the Emperor's Royal Guard. Now, I do believe that these characters really didn't come into prominence in the movie, Episode 1, until the very end, when it was no longer Chancellor Valorum, but instead Chancellor Palpatine. And I think that that's a very telling thing, because think about whenever we saw Emperor, spoiler alert, Chancellor Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine, whenever we saw Emperor Palpatine in Return of the Jedi, when we first saw him, he was accompanied by 6 Emperor's Royal Guards. And that was a cool, albeit, kind of mysterious thing. Like, what's their story? What would they be like in a fight? That kind of thing. So I thought it was very interesting that the precursor to that was sort of the same look, except in blue, and with the little feathered, I call it the Trojan kind of thing up at the top there, okay? So that was really cool. Of course, now you can also see eyes. You can see almost, again, like the gladiator kind of helmet. That's really cool, all right? And there we have General Zod. Chancellor Valorum, which is funny because General Zod was a villain, and a very delicious villain, whereas he was more of a, an injured politician. So very different roles. But you have Chancellor Valorum, and he has his little gown here, and with his like velvet, with his crushed velvet or whatever it is. Again, and another nice thing about I loved the differences in the prequel trilogy to the original trilogy. The original trilogy was used and lived in. The new trilogy was new and sleek because it was earlier. Like the 50s cars versus then all the beat up 80 and clunky 80s cars and 90s cars that were that many years apart. So I really think that they did an amazing job with that. I loved the art style that Doug Chiang, who was the primary artist on it, was doing with that. It was fantastic. And these, even like the toys, look at, I'll get you some close-ups. The close-up value of all of what you see here is just amazing. They do such a good job. I got to give it up for Hasbro, man. They do some pretty cool stuff. When you think about what we were getting just, 98? Like 12 years earlier, maybe? Wait a minute, no. 80, I guess it was 20 years earlier. 20 years earlier, maybe. Still, it was like, hard plastic and, just 5 points of articulation, where these guys, do these guys have the points? I forget. Well, their wrists definitely move. I don't know about their, it feels like their arms maybe not. I think, and that was kind of different depending on the figure. Some of them did a lot more, some of them did less, so. But in the end, they're just great. They look at them, and even without the box art, it was neat to see the red box art, okay, the Darth Maul in the front, but I have a couple of things like that to remind me of that specific art and design style. But these figures, they take one look at them and you just think, pretty cool. And that's what I love about them. And that's something that you didn't pick up on right away. You needed the benefit of time. Just like the original trilogy, we needed the benefit of time to respect it as its own entity. So much so that we defend it as the better of the trilogies when the prequels came out. And now, like violently sometimes. And then with the prequel trilogy, again, at the time it was like new and we didn't understand it and we were watching it as adults, a lot of us, and it was just weird. And now, with the sequel trilogy wrapped up, people are looking at the prequel trilogy with new eyes saying, remember when we had that? Remember when we had the prequel trilogy? Which I just think is hysterical because we did the same thing. It's like history keeps repeating itself. So I imagine in about 10, 15 years, another, and maybe earlier, if another trilogy comes into play, it could be a little different now because of the way things are, and the way we have it now with streaming service. We have The Mandalorian, we have the Cassian K2 show coming, Kenobi. Goodness knows, there's been rumors, crazy rumors about everybody else coming back, Mace Windu coming back. Who knows? So, it's hard to tell what the future will bring. But I do believe that people will look back in the sequel trilogy when these kids, these younger people that are still in middle, elementary, and high school, that was their Star Wars, and they come back and they're in their 20s and maybe even early 30s and look back at it fondly. I think you're going to see a very different viewpoint on the sequel trilogy. And there'll be people that are very vocal and in love with that trilogy, just like there are now people in love with and touting their love for the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. Personally, I'd rather be somebody who finds joy and happiness in all three trilogies, along with Mandalorian and Droids cartoons and Ewok movies and even the holiday special. Yes, there's a lot of weird parts there, but it's still got some enduring qualities. So, anyway, so that'll do it. These are some great pieces. If you can find a way to pick them up, I would. They're probably pretty expensive. The 2-packs tend to run a lot more money these days. but you can also find them in toy shows and things of that nature once things open up again. But thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification button, all that other stuff. Check out my merch. I got awesome merch, and I'm actually going to do an unboxing to talk all about the merch. But I will give you a quick heads up. It's essentially what we have been doing is I've been commissioning art of the old boxes of Star Wars vintage toys being unboxed. All right, mostly just stylized kind of cartoonish versions of the different toys in the vintage boxes. Okay, right, that's what we're doing right now. I also have a Darth Tuba logo, which I'm really loving, and I'm looking forward to showing you that when I get a shirt. And we have we have a Darth Tuba logo that looks like the Kenner logo, and we're going to be building up some more, and we're going to start building up a good library of logos and things that we're going to try to keep going as long as we can. You can check them out on TeePublic. If you look on my link, the link to my storefront is on the description of all my videos. But again, we'll get a whole unboxing with what kind of merchandise you can get and pick up very soon. Thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.